bring in Mohsen Milani from the University of South Florida. He's the executive director at their Center for Strategic and Diplomatic Studies. Professor Milani, good to have you with us. I have so many questions to ask you, but I want to begin with your assessment on how things went last week. Certainly no one was expecting a breakthrough, but it seems this round ended on a bit of a down note.
Thank you for your invitation. I think despite what the U.S. representatives have said in terms of their expectation that more progress should have been made, and even if the Iranians have claimed that the U.S. is not serious about negotiations, I look at this very differently. I think this meeting was essentially designed for the two sides to understand each other, to get to know each other, to size up each other, to see if they can find out exactly what each side is interested in achieving and how much of a compromise they're willing to make. And therefore, I am not surprised that nothing tangible has been achieved. Things are going to get much worse if they get any better, because the two sides at this time have made maximalist demands that neither side is willing to compromise on. So we have to wait and see what happens in the next round of the negotiations. But the very fact that the two sides have finally agreed to come to the negotiating table, I think is a positive sign.
What about the issue of which side does what first? That's still not resolved. Iran wants immediate removal of sanctions. U.S. says it wants full compliance first, Professor Milani. So if they haven't been able to resolve this during this past 6th round of negotiations, do you believe they can do it now?
It is going to be extremely difficult. On the one hand, the U.S. is very worried about the advances Iran has made in the past 5 or 6 months. Iran now has enriched uranium at 60%, which it had not done before. It has 2,300 kilograms of enriched uranium. It has started enriching uranium at 20% at Fordo facility in violation of the nuclear agreement of 2015. And I believe most experts believe that the breakout time, that is the time that Iran needs in order to build a bomb, has decreased from 1 year to about 2 years. Now, on the side of Iran, Iranians have been burned once. They were in compliance with all their obligations, and then President Trump decided to unilaterally withdraw from the Iranian nuclear deal. And as a result of this, somewhere between $150 to $200 billion of damage was inflicted on Iran. Therefore, what the Iranians are asking for is verification, verification, verification. They want to make sure that if they go back to the compliance of 2015 agreement, there are mechanisms in which the international community or perhaps Iran can make sure that the U.S. also complies with its obligation. Because what happens if 2 years from now, 3 years from now, actually, 3.5 years from now, we have a new president in the United States, and that president happened to follow the line of Donald Trump, and he decides to get out of the nuclear agreement? What then? Therefore, Iranians are asking for concrete mechanism to make sure that there are guarantees that the U.S. or the other 5 global powers can give to Iran, that Iran won't be burnt again in a few years from now.
Indeed, and you actually answered my next question. Let me move on to what we're hearing from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. It has blamed the United States as the culprit in this crisis. Is it safe to say, Professor, the Chinese have a point here? If the Trump administration had not abandoned this deal unilaterally, would we be here today?
Absolutely not. The Chinese are not the only ones who have correctly stated that. The Israelis in the past few weeks, many formal officials of the Netanyahu government have publicly stated that it was a strategic blunder by the US to get out of the nuclear deal. And even candidate Joe Biden, when he was running for the presidency, said many times that it was a blunder to get out of the nuclear agreement. And therefore, I think the Chinese are absolutely correct, and they are in a very good position today. They are in a much better position today than they were in 2015 to become much more active in these negotiations. For one thing, Iran today has joined the Shanghai Strategic Organization, Shanghai Organization, which China was a founding member of. Moreover, Iran and China have either signed or about to sign a 24-year agreement, which is, if once implemented, is going to make China a major player in Iranian internal politics. And most importantly, if the US and China move toward a new Cold War, if they do, or if they don't move toward the new Cold War, and they start a tough competition with one another, any kind of alliance between Iran and China is going to complicate things for the West. And therefore, China today is in an excellent position to take advantage of its position.
Professor, we're running out of time, but very quickly, how high are the stakes here if at the end there will be no agreement on JCPOA?
I think the stakes are extremely high. The Iranians believe that even if they don't have a nuclear agreement, they can pivot toward the East, toward China and Russia. But I believe that they are making a big strategic mistake. I think it is in the national interest of Iran. It is in the national interest of the United States. It is interest of the international community that the two sides go back to the negotiating table, abandon their maximalist demands, and accept limitations of their demand, and try to come out with some kind of honorable agreement in which Iranian nuclear program is controlled, but are guarantees that the next American administration is not going to withdraw from the nuclear deal without some sort of penalty or without some kind of assurance by other countries that they would compensate Iranian losses.
Understood. We'll have to leave it there. Professor Mohsen Milani, a pleasure as always. Thank you.